So I'm out for a steady 8-mile run. First mile and a bit on road, cattle grid. Then once we get off the road, we're then onto the trails for the remainder of the route, including heading up to the trig point. It's just behind where I live. It's only short, it's only about 300 odd metres in terms of the spot height, but it's a nice little hill up, and then back on this road into the finish. So nice, comfortable, probably look at about 9-minute average, something like that with the hills. So yeah, obviously a glorious day. Sun's out, sheep are chilling, and as always I've got the route to myself, so here we go. So just made it up to the trusty trig. It's not too steep of a climb, it's just a bit long. It's about a mile of climbing, but feeling good. Obviously the weather's always a good morale boost. And on that note, I thought I'd just quickly chat about the sun and obviously training in the heat and kind of do's and don'ts, because at least what I've seen recently, this time of year is always the case. There's a lot of people coming out and overcomplicating, you know, with formulas of this and formulas of that, etc., to adjust your pace based on certain temperatures. And I don't know, for me personally, I'm just like, why? What's the point in overcomplicating something that is actually relatively straightforward? And essentially it's manage your expectations. If you're running out in the heat, you're not going to be able to sustain the paces that you normally would in cooler temperatures. It's as simple as that. So obviously adjust your expectations of runs that you do in the heat. Doesn't mean you can't run in the heat, but just understand that they're going to be slower. So obviously you need to understand that, and therefore not try and force it and run at a steadier pace so that you can maintain the effort or whatever you're trying to achieve over that session. If you've got something intense planned like intervals, tempo or something like that, then obviously try and do that in the earlier hours or the later hours of the day so that you're not doing it in the peak heat. So yes, even though it's going to be a bit harder than what it would normally be, you're still going to be able to at least put in the relative effort. Because remember, that's what we're talking about here. Body recognises effort and stimulus rather than just generic paces and heart rate. So if you're getting out and doing a tempo session in the heat and still hitting that 7 or 8 RPE and the paces are a bit slower than normal, you're still going to have applied the right stimulus to get improvements in your lactate threshold. And then on top of that, obviously just a bit of preparation. So, you know, obviously electrolytes, sodium, something like that, if you can get that before you go out for your run, or at least take some out on your run with you. And obviously if you're going out for a long run in the heat, make sure you've got plenty of water and that you've eaten well before, you know, decent carb rich breakfast beforehand. And then obviously make sure you're eating and hydrating, a combination of obviously electrolytes, sodium and just normal water to thirst. And just make sure you're doing that consistently over your long run. That's it. Right, my run's done for the day, so time to get a little bit of food in me. Simple, I have pretty much the same breakfast every day. A bit of sourdough toast, a couple of slices of that, with some scrambled eggs, nice and seasoned. Every now and again I chuck a bit of avocado on the toast as well, but today it's just going to be eggs on toast. Smashing out three eggs, hitting a bit of pepper, a bit of salt, and then a bit of crushed chilies. Gotta have some chilies in your breakfast in the morning, man. You've also caught me this week on a very special occasion that I've got new shoes, but unfortunately I'm not allowed to wear them. So because we are planning on moving to New Zealand, and obviously things can be a little bit more expensive out there, we're kind of buying a few bits and pieces that we can, because we're shipping a lot of our house over there anyway, buying a few bits and pieces such as a new pair of running trainers that are clean, don't need to worry about quarantine or anything like that, that we can take out there with us, so that I've got a fresh new pair of kicks for training when I get out into New Zealand. So These are gonna have to sit in the box in the shed until we move. But that colour, isn't that epic? Yeah, that's nice. Hoka Torrent 2s, been my go-to trainer now for what, 5-6 years. They're a great all-round trail shoe in my opinion. They give me the cushioning that I want so that when I'm putting the miles in I don't suffer any issues or anything like that. And then if I want something that's a little bit more aggressive in terms of grip, I'll use one of my other options such as the Salomon Wildcross or the New Balance Summit Unknown 2. Another day, another gym session. Today we're going to be hitting a bit of chest, a bit of triceps, so hopefully get a nice little bit of a pump on the old chesticles. So I'll obviously go through the movements in the videos. It's absolutely sweltering in the gym. I'm already sweating and I've literally just done a bit of a warm up. So let's see how this session goes. Well, that is a chest pump right there. Good sesh. So week 2 now into my hypertrophy strength program, and yeah, bit of a dab on. So that's me at my desk now, ready to start work. Obviously doing stuff for my coached athletes and bits and pieces. But one last thing I do just to kind of finish the breakfast routine is taking some omega-3s. So I take the awesome supplements omegas from algae. I use awesome supplements pretty much for all of my supplementation, not that I have a huge amount of it. So I do use a pre-workout every now and again, not every training session for the gym, which I have from them as well, and doesn't contain caffeine, which is great. I use the omegas every single day. I have their whey, sorry, not their whey because it's a vegan protein powder. I have their pea protein powder and their vegan protein bars. So awesome supplements. Again, I don't receive anything from this. I'm not endorsed by these guys. I'm not an ambassador or anything. So please don't think that I'm trying to sell you something. Purely just telling you why I take what I take. They are a certified B Corp, so that means obviously their packaging and all that sort of stuff is more sustainable. The sources of which they get their supplements from are more sustainable, such as the algae for the omega-3s rather than farmed fish. I like the tastes, and it's just my way of reducing overall sort of meat and dairy on my day-to-day sort of meals and things like that. Not because I'm a vegan, because I do eat meat, not very often in terms of red meat, but I do eat a lot of chicken and turkey still, and I have eggs pretty much every single day. But this is just a way for me to reduce my overall content and getting it from a company that's a little bit more focused on the environmental impact. Another glorious day. Strapping in for 12 miles on my long run. I know it's not massively long, but I'm still just getting into the routine of consistent mileage at this point with some tempo sessions, so long runs aren't going to be too crazy at the moment. So a bit of hills, again nothing compared to a couple of weeks ago when I did the Bob Graham leg one route. So hopefully my legs won't be as battered from this as they were before. However, heavy deadlifts yesterday in the gym at about 4:30, so hamstrings are tight, lower back's a little bit tight, which is fine by the way, nothing to fear. I just worked those muscles. It's the first time I've deadlifted on this program, so a bit of shock to the system. Another glorious day. Sheep are chilling. Got some cows up ahead, so I'm gonna have to walk past those bad boys because I'm only young. So if I run past, they start seeing it as a game, start following me, and then some people will be a bit more intimidated, but I know they're just being kids. Third of the way through the run, well, 4 and a bit miles out of 12 and a bit. Back's completely loosened off, hamstrings have loosened off, feeling good. Bangers playing, sun's out, trail to myself as always. What more do you want from a long run? Loving it. This is what running's all about, isn't it? Bit of solitude, enjoying getting out, things feeling good. Not that it always feels good, but you take the bad to then get days like today. Loving it. Just had an epic long run on a random Thursday, and that's just because this weekend me and Jane are going to go and do the Yorkshire Three Peaks on Saturday. We're just doing it as our day out rather than for any particular time goals or anything like that. It was just, now that we're going to be moving abroad and leaving the UK, it was just one of the things we'd like to squeeze in before we do go. And kind of just go through what long runs are and what they aren't. Long runs, a lot of people tend to think that it's there and serves the purpose of you getting to run the distance or very, very close to the distance that your goal race is. So if you're running a marathon, a lot of people like to go and do, 22, 24 miles in their longest long run so that they know that they can go and run the distance on race day. And whilst you might be able to get away with that to a degree when it comes to marathons and below, obviously for ultra running, we can't. You can't go and run a 40 mile, 45 mile long run just before you're going to go and do the 50 mile race. You certainly can't go and do an 80 or 90 long run before going and doing a 100 mile race. So you don't need to cover the whole distance to be fully prepared for your goal race distance. That comes from other big factors such as consistency of training, weekly volume, which I'll touch on in a second. And also, if you're then going down that mindset of you have to have run a certain distance before going into your race, you're then placing a very, very high percentage of success on one singular run, i.e. the longest run that you're going to run in your training program, which is just not the case. Fitness, robustness and ability are all built over consistent running over time, and there's other aspects that are far more important than just that one singular distance run. There's also a point of diminishing returns when it comes to long runs, i.e. once we go past a certain duration, we're not necessarily even getting the aerobic benefits or the time on feet benefits that we get from a long run in the first place. And that tends to happen at around the 3 to 3.5 hour mark. Once we go beyond that 3.5 hours, all we're doing is increasing the recovery demands of that run, potentially increasing the chances of injury because we're obviously inducing more fatigue, and that could cause some issues or overuse problems. And also, if you're going out for that long of a duration, you're probably finding that you're going out for a long run that is a much bigger proportion of your overall weekly volume than it perhaps should be. I've got a downhill. Let's do it.
when it comes to long runs, we want to realistically divvy off 30 to 40% of our weekly mileage that particular week dedicated to the long run. So if you're running 60 miles per week, you're talking that your long run will only be 24 of those miles. So again, if you're going out for longer and longer distances and you're only running 60 miles per week, let's say, then obviously you're going out for larger and larger portions of that run than you should be, which is massively going to increase the recovery demand. So that potentially derails other elements of your training later in the week or the following week if you're not fully recovered from it. So it's some things to consider when programming your long runs and understanding what they are there for in the first place. And they're obviously there, like I said, yes, to build some aerobic fitness and endurance up to a point, but they're also there as a practice period. That's the kind of, for me personally, what I see long runs as the main purpose is a practice period to practice nutrition, timings and food to make sure that they work for you, they don't cause stomach upsets, and use it as a bit of a trial and error process to go, well, this particular food didn't work, so I'm going to try something else. Obviously, you practicing kit that you're going to be using, training with the kit that you're going to go and use on the race day itself, i.e. carrying it all in your vest in some training runs to get your body used to it and make sure it sits correctly, doesn't cause any unnecessary chafing and all that good stuff. Practice a little bit of pacing strategy, i.e. going out for these long runs. Do you feel that is sustainable for longer distances when it comes to race day? And developing that mental toughness element of being on your feet for longer durations of time, especially if you're doing it over arduous terrain. So for me, they are the main things that we get from doing a long run. We shouldn't be using them or seeing them as a way to get to very close to the race distance that we've got coming up, because again, you're potentially derailing all the other elements of training, and you're certainly then ignoring how fitness is built and how we prepare generally for races in the first place. And if you think back to that little stat of 60 miles per week and 24 miles being your longest long run, how many people are actually running 60 miles per week? In terms of a lot of recreational runners that I deal with in their busy jobs, lifestyles, family and all that stuff, most are doing between 20 and 40 miles per week at a max. So their longest long runs are going to be even shorter. So what we can do, obviously, to allow us to at least have some extra confidence going into a race is to do another race, i.e. if you've got a 50-mile race, maybe doing something like a 50k. Again, you're not going anywhere near the full distance, but it's just an opportunity to get into a race environment and just all those parts that I talked about there, nutrition, kit, all that good stuff, just a way to see how that handles in a race environment, and obviously giving you a bit more of a confidence boost that at the end of that race, if you've paced it right, you should feel like you could obviously hit then the full distance. But the best thing that's going to give you the confidence that you're trying to get from these long runs going into a race itself is to make sure that you prioritize improving your fitness, and obviously prioritize some decent weekly volume that fits within your lifestyle, or at least stretches it a little bit. And obviously that's where we can then refer to the mileage minimums. So for a 50k race, we want to be doing at least 30 miles per week. All right. However, if you want to really get the best out of your body for that distance, you want to be doing at least 50 miles per week. Either way, you want to be trying to hold that level of mileage for at least 3 weeks before your taper period. So about 5 weeks or so out from race day. For a 50-mile race, we want to be doing 40 miles per week, all right, as a minimum. But again, if we can do 60 miles per week or even more, you're going to get even more fitness and be even more prepared for that distance. And that applies for a 100k race as well. And we want to be doing that for 5 weeks before our taper phase. And then finally, for a 100-mile race, we want to be doing a minimum of 50 miles per week just to say we can complete that distance. But again, mileage matters most. If we can be hitting 70 or beyond, that's really going to help you be fully prepared for that particular distance. It's going to develop the frequency, the recovery, the resiliency, the robustness to be able to handle that particular distance. The long run is irrelevant to that. And again, if we're hitting 70 miles per week, taking 30 or 40% of that for the long run for those particular weeks, you're still only probably talking 25 to 30 miles anyway in terms of your longest long run if you're preparing for a 100-mile race. So then obviously that's where you could go and do something like a 100k tune-up race just as a bit of a confidence builder beforehand. But in terms of your long runs, see them as training rather than a confidence boost going into your race day. So hopefully you've enjoyed the video. As always, any questions, chuck them in the comments below. Any clarifications you want, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And I will catch up with you once we've done the Yorkshire Three Peaks at the weekend.